Black Maid saves her drunken billionaire boss from trouble. The next day he makes a shocking decision. The city never slept, but Maria always felt invisible. She had become a ghost in the towering offices of Thorne Industries, moving quietly through the halls, cleaning up after its billionaire owner, Mr. Thorne. Empty bottles littered the penthouse suite. Crumpled suits hung over chairs. The remnants of parties, deals, and one-night distractions marked the trail behind him. This was her world: tidy up, keep out of sight, survive. Take 1 minute to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. That night was like any other, the cold neon of the city slicing through the darkened windows. Maria held a glass of water in one hand and a damp cloth in the other, following the familiar sound of stumbling footsteps down the hallway. She found him in the conference room, Mr. Thorne, face pale and unsteady, a pen hovering over a contract that would hand the entirety of his empire to his fiercest competitor. Her heart thundered. She knew the stakes. She had read the papers, heard the whispers in hushed boardroom corners. And yet, as he swayed on the polished floor, laughing drunkenly at invisible jokes, she froze for only a second before stepping forward. "Stop," she said firmly, her voice trembling despite her determination. Mr. Thorne blinked at her, eyebrows furrowed, and for a moment the air between them felt impossibly heavy. The pen slipped from his hand and clattered to the floor. Maria picked it up and placed it gently on the table. She had no idea why she was risking everything: her job, her safety, her place in the shadows, but she could not let this happen. When he finally staggered out of the room, Maria stood there, pulse racing, heart hammering against her ribs. She waited for the aftermath: a sharp shout, a dismissal, maybe even a cold, furious glare. But nothing happened, not immediately. The next morning, the city was as bright and indifferent as ever. Maria walked into work expecting the worst. But instead of angry confrontation, she found something far more terrifying: a single sheet of paper, placed neatly on her desk. The edges were crisp. The signature unmistakable. The deed to Thorne Industries' rival's flagship company. Her name typed boldly at the top. Her hands shook as she stared at it. She was invisible yesterday. Today, she was untouchable. And yet, she had no idea what that really meant. Because with power came enemies, ruthless and patient. And the first to notice her sudden rise was the man who had always overlooked her. When Mr. Thorne walked into the office, his sharp eyes found her instantly. He didn't smile. He didn't congratulate her. But there was a weight in his stare, a quiet, unyielding intensity that Maria had never seen before. It wasn't admiration. Not yet. It was something far more dangerous. Something that would change everything. Maria had never imagined herself in a boardroom, let alone in the spotlight of the city's most ruthless corporate battlefield. The morning sunlight spilled through the glass walls of Thorne Industries, glinting off polished surfaces, casting a golden sheen over a world that had once seemed untouchable, reserved only for the privileged, the powerful, the ruthless. And now, it was hers. Or at least, partially hers. She stared at the deed again, almost unable to believe it was real. Her name, Maria Santiago, printed in bold letters as the new owner of a company that rivaled Thorne Industries itself. Her hands trembled, not from excitement, but from fear. She didn't understand the contracts, the assets, the debts, or the hidden traps embedded in the fine print. She had never even negotiated a lease for her tiny apartment. Now she was suddenly the legal holder of a multi-billion-dollar empire. The office was quiet at first, almost suspiciously so. Maria noticed the subtle shift in the atmosphere, the glances that lingered too long, the sudden phone calls hushed mid-conversation, the way assistants and executives stepped carefully around her desk as if she were some volatile experiment about to explode. Whispers followed her wherever she went. By lunch, she realized the news had already spread. The quiet cleaning woman, invisible to everyone, had become the woman who owned a rival company. Her phone vibrated incessantly, emails flooding in faster than she could open them. Lawyers, financial analysts, even media outlets demanding interviews, some respectful, others aggressive, all of them urgent. And through it all, one figure remained unnervingly calm, Mr. Thorne. He appeared suddenly in the doorway, impeccably dressed, hair combed to perfection, his expression a mask she couldn't read. His usual arrogance was tempered, replaced by something colder, sharper, a quiet storm of restrained emotion. "You've read it, I assume," he said, his voice smooth but carrying an edge that made her instinctively straighten her back. "Yes," Maria whispered. She wasn't sure if she was answering him or telling herself she wasn't dreaming. "Do you know what you've done?" he asked, stepping closer, the distance between them charged with unspoken tension. "Because this isn't a gift, Maria. This is a war. And you're already on the front lines." Maria's stomach churned. She had never considered herself brave. She had cleaned offices, refilled champagne bottles, and smoothed over other people's mistakes. She had survived in the shadows. But war? Front lines? She felt exposed, vulnerable in ways she had never experienced. I didn't do anything," she stammered. "I just stopped you from signing that paper." Mr. Thorne's gaze sharpened, eyes narrowing. "That's exactly why you're in this position. You intervened at the perfect moment. And now, whether you like it or not, the city is watching. Every investor, every competitor, every journalist, they all know your name. And they're all waiting for you to fail." Failure. The word echoed in her head. She realized, with sudden clarity, that she didn't even know the rules of this game. She didn't know how to lead a company, how to negotiate, how to protect what was now hers. And worse, she had no idea how to defend herself from those who would take it away. The first test came within hours. A man in a crisp navy suit entered her office, flashing a business card with a confident smile. "Maria Santiago?" he asked. "I'm Victor Lang. I represent Kessler and Company, Thorne Industries' closest competitor. And they want their company back." Maria swallowed hard. I don't want to sell anything," she said, her voice wavering. Victor's smile didn't falter. "You don't understand. Legally, they have a claim. And if you refuse, well, let's just say, they won't be gentle. They'll go after every asset, every contract, every employee connected to you." The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Maria's hands shook. She had never negotiated with anyone, had never dealt with threats that carried the weight of billions. Panic clawed at her chest. And then, unexpectedly, Mr. Thorne spoke again. "Don't worry," he said, stepping closer until his presence was almost overwhelming. "I'll guide you, but you have to be willing to fight. This is bigger than you, bigger than me, bigger than either of our companies. If you hesitate, even for a second, you'll lose." Maria looked at him, trying to read his expression. For the first time, she saw a flicker of vulnerability behind his controlled exterior, a trace of respect, or maybe fear. And suddenly, she realized something terrifying: she didn't just need his guidance. She needed his approval. And that thought made her pulse quicken, not just with fear, but something deeper, more confusing. The days that followed were a blur of meetings, calls, and impossible decisions. She learned quickly, often too quickly. She realized the company she now owned was not just a business, it was a living, breathing organism, and every wrong move could kill it. She began to understand the subtle power plays, the backroom deals, the hidden alliances that shaped the corporate landscape. And all the while, Mr. Thorne watched. He never overtly interfered, but his presence was constant, a shadow she couldn't ignore. There were moments when his eyes lingered on her longer than necessary, moments when he spoke with a tone that blurred the lines between mentor, adversary, and something else she didn't yet understand. Then came the first real attack. A key client, one Maria had worked tirelessly to retain, called her directly. The voice on the other end was smooth, measured, but dripping with menace. "You don't know what you've stepped into, Maria Santiago. Hand over the company, and maybe we can forget this ever happened. Refuse, and we will make sure your entire empire crumbles before your eyes." Maria's fingers trembled over the phone, her knuckles white. She wanted to scream, to hang up, to run back to the safety of cleaning rooms and making herself invisible. But something inside her shifted. The fear remained, but so did a spark of defiance. "I don't give up," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "This company is mine. And I will protect it." Silence. Then a slow, deliberate click as the line went dead. Maria sank into her chair, exhausted, terrified, exhilarated. She realized something profound. For the first time in her life, she was being seen, not as a ghost, not as someone to be overlooked, but as a player. As a force. As someone who could no longer be ignored. And as she looked across the city skyline from her office, the lights twinkling like distant stars, she knew one thing with certainty: nothing would ever be the same again. Because Maria Santiago had entered a world where power was absolute, enemies were everywhere, and even survival felt like a battlefield. And she had no choice but to fight. Maria had survived her first week as the accidental owner of a rival company, but survival had a bitter taste. She learned quickly that wealth and power didn't automatically grant respect, especially when every glance in the city's high-rise towers carried judgment, envy, or outright malice. Her mornings now began with stacks of financial reports she couldn't fully decipher, meetings with attorneys who spoke a language of leverage and loopholes, and phone calls with aggressive competitors who clearly had no intention of playing fair. She moved like a shadow through the glass towers of power, always listening, always calculating, but every step forward felt precarious. And then there was Mr. Thorne. He didn't hover, he didn't need to. His presence was magnetic, omnipresent, a silent force she couldn't ignore. He offered advice in moments of crisis, precise and calculated, but his eyes were relentless. Sometimes she swore they were analyzing her as if she were a puzzle, sometimes as if she were a threat. And sometimes, she caught something else there, a hint of admiration, or maybe curiosity, that made her stomach twist in ways she didn't understand. The first real test of her fledgling authority came on a Monday morning. The boardroom was packed, executives from both her company and the rival firm she now owned. Maria, for the first time, was expected to sit at the head of the table. Her palms were sweaty, her heart racing, but she forced herself to straighten her back and meet the eyes of the room. Victor Lang, the man who had issued the first veiled threat, sat across from her. His smirk was infuriatingly smug. "Congratulations, Maria," he said smoothly. "But I'm curious, how do you intend to run a company you barely understand?" Maria's pulse quickened. She could feel the tension radiating from the room, the silent bets being placed. Would the cleaning woman crumble, or would she rise? She drew a deep breath. "I'm here to learn," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "But I'm also here to protect this company. And anyone who underestimates me will regret it." There was a ripple of surprise across the table. Some executives shifted nervously, others exchanged worried glances. Victor's smirk faltered, replaced by a thin line of irritation. Maria noticed Mr. Thorne leaning against the wall, his arms crossed, watching with that inscrutable expression. And for a moment, she thought she detected a flicker of pride. The meeting became a battlefield of numbers, strategies, and cold, cutting remarks. Maria didn't understand everything. They spoke of mergers, patents, and market shares with a fluency that left her dizzy, but she spoke with a clarity that stunned the room. She asked questions that cut to the core of each argument, exposing weaknesses no one expected a novice to see. By the end of the meeting, Victor Lang was visibly shaken. He had assumed she would falter, that she would be intimidated. Instead, she had held her ground. She hadn't won the war, but she had survived the first battle, and that was enough. Outside the boardroom, Maria leaned against the window, letting the city's dizzying lights wash over her. She realized she was no longer the invisible cleaner who moved quietly in the shadows. The city was watching, and she had made a mark. But the moment of triumph was short-lived. Late that night, a series of emails landed in her inbox, each more threatening than the last. Key clients were being bribed, contracts were being challenged, and anonymous messages hinted at sabotage from within her own company. Someone had leaked sensitive financial data, and the fallout could ruin her before she even fully understood how to protect herself. Maria's chest tightened. She had no allies, no mentors who truly cared, and the man who had put her in this position, the man she was slowly learning to understand, was absent from her side. She felt the crushing weight of isolation. Then, unexpectedly, her phone buzzed. A single message from an unknown number: "Meet me at the penthouse. Now." Her blood ran cold. It had to be him. Mr. Thorne. She had no choice but to go. The elevator ride to the penthouse felt interminable, every floor chime echoing in her chest like a warning drum. When the doors opened, she found the suite empty, except for him. Mr. Thorne stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city's skyline glowing behind him like a halo of cold light. "You survived today," he said quietly, almost to himself. "And yet, you don't understand what comes next." Maria's lips parted. I'm trying. I'm learning." He turned toward her, the distance between them shrinking. His gaze locked onto hers, intense, unyielding. "Try harder. You can't just survive in this world, Maria. You have to dominate it. And sometimes, you have to fight dirty." She swallowed hard, realizing that the lessons he spoke of weren't just about business. They were about life, power, control, and the kind of ruthlessness that left no room for weakness. "And," he added, his voice dropping to a low, almost intimate tone, "you can't do it alone." The words sent a shiver down her spine. She didn't know if it was fear, anticipation, or something far more dangerous, far more electrifying. In that moment, Maria understood the truth of her new reality. Every ally could be a threat, every victory a trap, and every glance from Mr. Thorne a challenge she could neither ignore nor resist. And as she looked at him, the city sprawled endlessly beyond the windows, she realized she was no longer invisible. She was powerful, yes, but also dangerously exposed. The city never slept, but now Maria found she barely had time to breathe. Each morning, she woke to a storm of emails, calls, and threats. The competitor she now technically owned, the one who had once laughed at her as a ghostly cleaner, had mobilized against her. It wasn't just Victor Lang anymore. Entire networks of power, alliances carefully cultivated over decades, now bore down on her from every angle. Maria had learned quickly. She had turned her office into a command center, poring over spreadsheets, legal memos, and market projections. Her first battle had been survival. Her second, proving she belonged in a world where everyone expected her to fail. And now came the most dangerous phase, retaliation. The first attack was subtle. A major investor pulled out of a multi-million-dollar deal, citing concerns about leadership stability. Then, a senior executive in her company began leaking confidential strategies to Victor Lang's team. It was relentless, like a predator circling a prey, testing weaknesses, watching her reaction. But Maria had learned the rules. She began to fight back. With careful precision, she traced the leaks, uncovering hidden alliances and corrupt loyalties. She confronted the traitors with a quiet ferocity that surprised even herself, demanding loyalty or departure. Every step was deliberate, every decision calculated, but every move brought her closer to the dangerous edge of power. And then there was Mr. Thorne. He appeared in her office late one night, his tailored suit black against the dim glow of her desk lamp. He didn't enter with commands or instructions this time. He came with an offer, a test. "There's a critical contract," he said, tossing a folder onto her desk. "Your competitors want it. You need to get it first, or you'll be crushed." Maria opened it, skimming the complex terms. Her head swam with numbers, clauses, and hidden pitfalls. I don't know if I can negotiate this," she admitted. Mr. Thorne stepped closer, his presence overwhelming, yet strangely protective. "You can. I won't do it for you, but I'll guide you. Just, trust your instincts." Maria's pulse quickened. She trusted instincts she had never known she had. That night, she stayed in the office until dawn, drafting, redrafting, strategizing. By morning, she had orchestrated a move that not only secured the contract but exposed her rivals' underhanded tactics in front of their key clients. Victory tasted sweet, but she knew it was fleeting. The moment of celebration was interrupted by a shocking revelation. One of her closest allies, someone she had trusted implicitly, had been working with Victor Lang from the start. The betrayal cut deep, a reminder that in this world, trust was a luxury Maria could no longer afford. She confronted him in the shadowed corridors of her office. "Why?" she demanded, voice trembling with rage and disbelief. He sneered. "Because power is survival, Maria. And you were never supposed to survive." The betrayal ignited something fierce within her. Maria realized she didn't just need to defend her company. She needed to master it, dominate it, and protect herself from everyone, friend, foe, and even the enigmatic man who had thrown her into this world. By nightfall, she called an emergency board meeting. She stood at the head of the table, her hands steady, eyes sharp, voice unwavering. "From today forward, I am in charge. Every decision I make will be final. Anyone who opposes me will be shown the door. And anyone who betrays this company will pay the consequences." Silence filled the room. Then, slowly, the board members nodded, some grudgingly, some with admiration. Maria had survived the war's first salvo. But she knew the final battle, the one that would define her place in this world, was coming. And she would need every ounce of cunning, courage, and determination to win. The climax arrived not with a roar but with a quiet, deadly precision. Maria had spent weeks orchestrating her next move, turning the enemy's own strategies against them. Every contract she renegotiated, every alliance she forged, every threat she neutralized was part of a larger plan. The city was unaware of the storm unfolding behind closed doors. And yet, the ripple effects were about to become undeniable. Victor Lang made his final attempt, an aggressive, hostile takeover maneuver designed to destabilize her entirely. But Maria anticipated it. She had used the leaked information from her betrayer to set a trap, positioning her company's assets and public image in a way that not only blocked Victor's move but made it impossible for him to recover without public humiliation. The boardroom showdown was cinematic in its intensity. Victor stormed in, confident, poised, and smug, expecting a panicked, inexperienced Maria. But she stood tall, unflinching, every word deliberate, every counterargument precise. The room watched in awe as she dismantled his every claim, revealed the treachery of his accomplices, and secured her company's future in a masterstroke of strategy and foresight. Victor left defeated, humiliated, his empire of influence fractured. Maria's triumph was complete, but it wasn't just a business victory. It was transformation. That night, in the quiet of the penthouse, she finally allowed herself to exhale. The city sprawled endlessly outside the windows, glittering like a promise of the future she had earned through courage and sheer determination. Mr. Thorne appeared silently, leaning against the window frame, his eyes fixed on her. He didn't congratulate her with words. Instead, he simply said, "You've become everything I didn't expect, and everything I feared you could be." Maria looked at him, her pulse still racing from the adrenaline, her body still humming with power and exhaustion. "I didn't just survive," she said, voice steady. "I won. And I'll keep winning, on my terms." He stepped closer, a fraction of a smile playing at his lips. "On your terms," he repeated, almost like a promise, or a warning. For the first time, Maria realized the complexity of their dynamic. He had pushed her into the fire, challenged her at every turn, but he had also forced her to discover the strength she had never known existed. And in that shared intensity, there was a connection, dangerous, magnetic, and undeniable. Maria Santiago, once invisible, had not only survived the storm, she had mastered it. She had taken a world that expected her to fail and reshaped it in her image. She had learned that power, courage, and intellect were more formidable than fear. She had learned that survival wasn't enough, domination was the only path forward. And as she stood next to Mr. Thorne, watching the city lights reflect in his eyes, she understood one final, intoxicating truth: she was no longer just a player in the game. She was a force to be reckoned with. The city would never forget her name. Maria Santiago, cleaner, survivor, and now, undisputed queen of a corporate empire.